Ardora's life was nothing like the bright, carefree days she had imagined as a child. She had always dreamed of adventure, freedom, and a future filled with endless possibilities. But now, at 17, her world had become a cage made of duties and expectations. Her father had been her world. He was a kind man, who showered her with love and gave her the best of everything he could afford. But his sudden death had shattered the picture-perfect life she had once known. It didn't take long before her stepmother, Negozzi, made her true intentions clear. Ardora had been just a child when her father married Negozzi, and she'd hoped that with time, the two women could grow to care for one another. But instead, Negozzi made Ardora's life a daily struggle. It wasn't the kind of struggle that could be easily seen by others. To the outside world, Ardora had the same routine as any other schoolgirl. She went to school, came home, and spent time with her friends. But the reality behind closed doors was far different. Ardora had taken over every household chore since her father's death. Each day began before the first light of dawn, with her sweeping, mopping, and scrubbing floors. She learned to cook with whatever ingredients were available, sometimes making do with meager portions to feed the family. Negozzi had no qualms about making Ardora work like a servant, and her half-sister, Shinanso, did nothing but complain when asked to help. Shinanso, who was younger, would spend her days lounging, enjoying the comforts Ardora had once known, as if their family hadn't been upended by the death of their father. When Ardora came home from school, it was no different. She would race to the kitchen to finish cooking and cleaning, only to find that Shinanso's homework remained untouched. "Ardora, can you help me with my math homework?" "I don't understand it," Shinanso would say, her voice laced with mock sweetness. Ardora would sigh, feeling her heart ache with the burden of it all. She would sit down and help her half-sister, even though she hadn't had the time to do her own homework, never mind studying for exams. "Why don't you do your own work for once?" Ardora would ask, but it was always in vain. Negozzi, sitting in her easy chair and reading through a magazine, would make sure that Ardora knew her place. "Shinanso is young. She deserves to enjoy her childhood, while you should be more responsible, Ardora," Negozzi would snap. Every day felt like another round of trials, with no end in sight. But Ardora, with a heart full of hope, did not let the weight of her stepmother's cruelty crush her spirit. She kept her dreams alive through the quiet moments, the stolen moments of peace she found at school, in the corners of the library, and most of all, in the kind eyes of Chijioke. Chijioke was the local shoemaker, a simple man who, despite his modest means, had an air of quiet dignity. Ardora had known him for years, having passed his shop many times on her way home from school. He always greeted her with a smile, often taking the time to ask how her day had gone. Their conversations had started off casual, but over time, Ardora had come to appreciate him not just for his kindness but for the sense of calm he brought to her troubled life. "Good afternoon, Ardora. How was school today?" Chijioke would ask as she walked past his shop, his hands steady and sure as he worked on mending a shoe or polishing a leather bag. "Same as usual," Ardora would reply, forcing a smile, though her heart weighed heavy. "How about you, Chijioke?" The simplicity of their exchange was a welcome relief. Chijioke was a humble man with no airs about him, but his calm demeanor had a soothing effect on Ardora. She often found herself lingering at his shop after school, catching a breath before returning to the relentless duties of home. One day, as Ardora paused by his shop on her way back from school, Chijioke looked up from his work and gave her an inviting smile. "Ardora, come sit for a moment," he said, motioning to a small wooden chair in front of his shop. Ardora hesitated, glancing toward the looming presence of her home in the distance. I don't have much time," she said, her voice soft with the weight of responsibilities. "All I know is that I'll have to keep going, keep working. My stepmother would be waiting for me." Chijioke studied her with quiet concern. "I hope things get better for you, Ardora. You deserve more than this." The simple kindness in his words left an imprint on her heart. Chijioke didn't know the depths of her pain, But in that moment, he became the only person in her life who truly saw her. That night, after another long day of work, Ardora returned home to find Negozzi sitting in the living room, her expression unreadable. "Sit down, Ardora," Negozzi ordered, her tone sharp. Ardora complied, sitting in the chair opposite her stepmother. "I've been thinking," Negozzi began, her voice calculated, "and I think it's time for you to marry." Ardora blinked in shock. "Marry? But I'm only 17. I don't even know what you're talking about." Negozzi's lips curled into a smile, one that made Ardora's skin crawl. "I've made arrangements for you. There's a young man I've been speaking with. He's a good match for you. You'll marry him, and it will secure your future." Ardora's heart sank. She hadn't expected this. "Who is he?" "His name is Chijike, and he's a fine young man," Negozzi said with exaggerated enthusiasm. "He comes from a good family, and he'll provide you with everything you need." "But he is a shoemaker," said Ardora. "It's the opportunity of a lifetime, Ardora. No one would marry you, and he likes you, and I know you sometimes speak with him. I told him you liked him so much, and he asked for your hand in marriage." "Like him? When did I tell you that?" Ardora exclaimed in shock to her stepmother's words. Negozzi's gaze hardened. "That's irrelevant. This is what's best for you. I'm doing this for your future. Don't question it." Ardora was silent, her mind racing. "But I don't even know him." "You will do as you are told." The weight of the words pressed down on Ardora's chest. A future she had never asked for. A future shaped by her stepmother's desires, not her own. The next day, as Ardora walked down the street, her thoughts consumed with the shocking conversation from the night before, she found herself face to face with Chijioke. "Hey, Ardora," he said with his usual gentle smile. "Hi, Chijioke," she replied softly, her voice tinged with a mixture of frustration and sadness. "Did your stepmother tell you I asked for your hand in marriage?" "She told me you like me a lot," Chijioke observed, pausing his work to look at her more closely. Ardora sighed. "She lied. My stepmother has decided that I should marry you without my consent. She's already made the arrangements without involving me. But she said you really like me," Chijioke's brow furrowing. "I'm really sorry." "I know," Ardora whispered, feeling the weight of her reality settle on her once again. "But it's not my choice." As Ardora turned to leave, her heart ached. Would she ever escape the grip of her stepmother's control? And would she ever find the chance to live the life she so desperately longed for? Little did Ardora know, the truth about the man her stepmother had arranged for her to marry was a secret that would soon turn her life upside down. Negozzi had no clue about Chijioke's true identity. She believed him to be a poor, struggling shoemaker, just the kind of man she could easily manipulate. Her plan was simple: trick Ardora into marrying him, then use the marriage to her own advantage. But Negozzi's real scheme didn't end there. She had another plan for her first daughter, Nkechi. A plan that involved marriage to the so-called rich man who was actually Chijioke's friend, a businessman who was just as wealthy as Chijioke but preferred to stay in the shadows. Negozzi was convinced that marrying Nkechi to a rich man would secure her daughter's future, a future that Ardora would never have if she married Chijioke. Negozzi never imagined that the shoemaker she thought was just a poor man would turn out to be the very person who would bring her plans crashing down. The days leading up to the wedding day felt like an eternity for Ardora. Every time she looked into Chijioke's eyes, she saw a kindness that made her heart ache. But her mind was clouded with the harsh reality that she was being forced into a marriage she didn't want. On the morning of the wedding, Negozzi was as smug as ever. She had ensured everything was in place. Her daughter, Nkechi, had been sent off to buy a wedding dress, while Ardora's was already waiting for her at the tailor's shop. Ardora's stomach churned as she walked into the small, modest church where the ceremony was to take place. The church was far from grand, and everything about it felt rushed and forced. The low hum of chatter from the small crowd only made her feel more isolated. "Are you ready, my dear?" Negozzi asked, her voice laced with excitement, but Ardora could hear the faint tremble of impatience beneath it. Ardora nodded, but inside, she felt like a prisoner. As she stepped forward to join Chijioke at the altar, she glanced at his face. There was a tenderness in his gaze that she couldn't ignore. It made her heart flutter for a moment, but then reality hit her again. She was not in control of her life. And so, the wedding proceeded, with Ardora's heart heavy and her future uncertain. What she didn't know was that this was only the beginning. Soon, the truth would come to light. And when it did, it would change everything for both her and her stepmother, forever. Ardora settled into her new life as Chijioke's wife with a mix of uncertainty and a surprising sense of peace. The days were filled with moments of quiet tenderness, small acts of love that slowly built the foundation of their relationship. Despite the awkward start to their marriage, things were changing. The man she had once viewed as a poor shoemaker, someone she had reluctantly married out of obligation, was slowly becoming someone she could truly respect and even admire. Every day, she saw another side of him, his kindness, his humility, his strong work ethic. Chijioke worked long hours in his shop, but he always made time to check on her, share a cup of tea, or ask how her day had been. He made her laugh with his simple humor, and when she looked into his eyes, she saw something that made her feel safe, something that made her feel like this marriage wasn't as bad as she had thought it would be. As the weeks went by, Ardora found herself growing to care for him more and more each day. She had thought she'd be trapped in a loveless marriage forever, but now, she found warmth in the life they were building together. Chijioke was not only her husband, but also her friend, someone she could talk to, confide in, and rely on. For the first time in her life, Ardora felt truly supported. The burden of her stepmother's cruelty, the years of working herself to exhaustion, all seemed to lift with each passing day. The man she had once viewed as just a poor shoemaker was quickly becoming someone she admired deeply. She helped him with his business, learning how to manage his finances, improving his marketing, and even offering suggestions for new designs. In return, Chijioke helped her regain her confidence, showing her how to stand up for herself and make decisions for her future, without fear of her stepmother's influence. But as their connection grew stronger, there was a new challenge looming on the horizon. One afternoon, as they sat together in their modest living room, Ardora's stepmother, Negozzi, came to visit. Ardora hadn't seen her in weeks, and something about the woman's presence still made her uneasy. But when she entered the house, her usual smug smile was replaced with an air of self-satisfaction. "You know, Ardora," Negozzi began, her voice laced with pride, "I've been hearing some things about your husband." She emphasized the word husband with a sly grin. "It's funny, isn't it? How your life can change so much in such a short time." Ardora looked at her stepmother, confusion creeping into her mind. "What are you talking about, Negozzi?" Her stepmother leaned in, lowering her voice as if she were about to impart some great secret. "You're married to a shoemaker, yes? Well, it turns out, your half-sister, Nkechi, is marrying someone far more important." Ardora's stomach twisted. "What do you mean?" Negozzi's smile widened, satisfaction radiating from her face. "Nkechi is marrying Chijioke's best friend. A very wealthy man, by the way. He's not like your husband. He's a real businessman, someone who can give Nkechi the life she deserves." Ardora's heart sank as she tried to process the words. It was clear that Negozzi was trying to remind her of the difference between her life and Nkechi's, to make her feel small and insignificant. But something in her chest began to tighten. She realized that her stepmother's manipulations had no hold on her anymore. No matter what she had to say, Ardora was happy. And she was learning to love Chijioke. "What does it matter to me who Nkechi marries?" Ardora asked, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions within. "I'm married to Chijioke, and that's what matters." Negozzi chuckled, clearly enjoying the power she felt she had over Ardora. "Well, I thought you might want to know." After all, I'm sure you'd love to see your half-sister have what you didn't get, real wealth. The days that followed were heavy with the knowledge that Ardora's stepmother was still scheming, but something inside Ardora had changed. She no longer cared about the way her stepmother viewed her or her marriage. She was happy with Chijioke, and no one, least of all her stepmother, could take that away. Then, one day, after weeks of growing closer and learning more about one another, Chijioke sat Ardora down after dinner. She had noticed a certain change in him, an air of seriousness that was rare for him, especially in such a peaceful moment. There was a quiet intensity to his eyes, as if something important was coming. Ardora, he began, his voice serious yet warm, I've been meaning to tell you something. Ardora felt her pulse quicken. It was clear he had something significant to say. What is it, Chijioke? She asked softly. He took a deep breath, standing up to face her. I didn't want to keep this from you any longer. I've been hiding the truth, but I can't anymore. Ardora's heart began to race, a mixture of fear and curiosity swirling within her. What are you talking about? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Chijioke's face softened. I'm not just a shoemaker, Ardora. I'm a businessman. A very wealthy one. I've been hiding my true identity because I wanted to be sure. I wanted to make sure you loved me for me, not for my wealth. Ardora's mind was spinning. What? She gasped, standing up in shock. What do you mean? All this time, you were hiding who you really are? He nodded, a small smile appearing on his face. Yes. But I realized something. I love you, Ardora. I don't want you to be with me because of what I have, but because of who I am and because of the love we've built. The room seemed to fall silent as Ardora processed his words. Her heart was racing. Chijioke, the man she had grown to love, wasn't the poor shoemaker she thought he was. He was someone else entirely. But the revelation didn't scare her. It didn't make her love him any less. It only made her realize how deep their bond had become. Just as the shock was beginning to settle, Ardora's stepmother barged into the room, her eyes flashing with anger. So, it's true, she spat, you've been hiding your wealth this whole time. And now, you think you can control everything. Chijioke stood tall, unfazed by her fury. I've never wanted to control anything. I just wanted to love Ardora. But you've tried to manipulate everything. And now, you've forced your daughter to marry my best friend. Who you thought would be the rich man. But I'm the one with the wealth. Ardora's mind reeled as the pieces of the puzzle fell into place. Her stepmother's plan to marry off her daughter to Chijioke's rich friend was nothing but a farce. The rich friend was Chijioke, he had orchestrated everything to find true love. Later that night, as Ardora and Chijioke sat together, still processing the monumental shift in their lives, there was a knock on the door. Ardora's heart sank when she saw Negotsi standing there, her expression twisted in regret. Chijioke, you lied. Why were you pretending your friend was the shoemaker and you were the rich one? Why did you lie about your identity? Negotsi asked, slightly angry. What would you have done? Chijioke asked Negotsi, marry your daughter to me and Ardora to my friend? Is that your plan all along? You think Ardora don't deserve better? He said angrily. I was wrong, she began, her voice trembling. I thought I could control everything. But now, I see the truth. Ardora, please forgive me. I've been a terrible stepmother. Ardora's face hardened. You manipulated me, forced me into a marriage I didn't want. And now you want my forgiveness? Negotsi dropped her gaze. Please, Ardora. I know it's too late for forgiveness, but can you let Chijioke marry Nkechi as a second wife? She's my daughter. She deserves the best. Ardora could barely contain her rage. No. No more of your manipulations. No more of your schemes. She turned to Chijioke, her voice trembling with the weight of everything they had been through. "We're happy now. You and I, don't let her ruin this." And just as Ardora finished speaking, Chijioke stood, his voice firm and resolute. "Negotsi, we don't owe you anything. I will not marry your daughter, and Ardora is my only wife. You need to accept that." Ardora stood firmly by Chijioke's side, her heart light for the first time in years. The games, the lies, and the manipulations of her stepmother had no power over her anymore. She was loved for who she was, not for what others wanted her to be. Negotsi, realizing the depth of her mistake, could only watch as her plans crumbled. Chijioke and Ardora's bond was unshakable, built on truth, respect, and genuine love. The wealth Chijioke had kept hidden no longer mattered. What mattered was the life they had built together, a life full of laughter, warmth, and support. As for Nkechi, her mother's manipulations had failed to entrap her, and her marriage to the so-called rich friend was nothing but a dream turned into a hollow reality. The truth about Chijioke's wealth was a lesson for all of them. That love was never about status or material wealth, but about connection, kindness, and the strength of two people willing to fight for each other. Ardora smiled, her future brighter than ever. She had found love in the most unexpected place, and her stepmother's schemes had only brought her closer to the one person who truly mattered. Chijioke was no longer the poor shoemaker in her eyes, he was her partner, her equal, and the love of her life. Together, they had triumphed over everything. And as they looked forward to the future, nothing at all, could tear them apart. If you enjoyed this story, feel free to watch other interesting tales on our channel. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, so you won't miss out on our next thrilling adventure. See you in our next story.